everybody. Thanks for joining me as we talk a little bit about self-censorship, bias, and tendency for Dr. Kwan's class Info 5405. My name is Mallory Slowinski, and let's dive right in. In Todd Kyle's 2008 article, he talked about qualities of a good book, and I found that really interesting because everybody sort of has their definition of what they define good literature to require. And he has these 5 characteristics of a good book. And the first is voice. And that is just evocative narration that conveys the story effectively. Next, he talked about themes and message that are well developed and satisfying to the reader. Good books also have effective plot elements and plausible and believable characters that feel real and that we want to root for. And he also says that they have effective read aloud qualities, and I found that particularly interesting. He says that the definition of quality and true appeal really are the same, and that they are ones that kids like. And that when we are curating materials for our collection, that they need to have quality and appeal. That they need to have either one or the other, that they need to have qualities of a good book, or they need to have appeal. They need to be ones that kids like. And we need to avoid books that have neither. So when we move into thoughts about censorship practices, I read some research by Emily J.M. Knox from 2017, and she really clearly defined censorship practices into these 2 categories: active practices and passive practices. And she also talked about how censorship is about power and control, and that censorship really involves an unequal power dynamic. And active practices, she says, are divided into these 4 R's. Redaction, which is crossing out or marking out certain pages or images or text. Restriction, which is limiting who has access to a particular item. Age is often a factor. Think about like R-rated movies. That's an example of restriction. Relocation, colloquially that's often termed behind the desk, so that staff can monitor who checks out a particular item and ensure that criteria is met before circulating an item. And removal, that's the 4th R. An item is removed from the collection or curriculum. And passive practice is where self-censorship falls under. And self-censorship is choosing not to select materials because of a personal bias or fear of reprisal from the community. Self-censorship is heavily influenced by your personal bias, which is in that passive practice. And examples of bias include only collecting material representing one political view, or materials that do not reflect the diversity of human experience. Here's a quote from April M. Dawkins from 2018. She says that self-censorship occurs when a school librarian chooses not to add material to a collection for fear of a challenge. It's also to avoid hassle or publicity, or for fear of how your administration might handle the challenge. The problem with self-censorship is it gives into this personal bias. And you're only curating materials that reflect one political point of view, or that's not representing that diversity of human experience. And it's important to be aware of our own personal biases so they do not impact your library curation policies or purchases. So there's 3 reasons why you should consider it most essential to have a collection policy and why. And this came from that same April M. Dawkins article. So why should every library have a collection policy? 1, it helps to prevent against your own self-censorship. It helps you have a challenge process for when a book or a resource is challenged, and it ensures access and intellectual freedom for students per our librarian's code of ethics. I learned so much through researching this topic and reading the literature. The impact that self-censorship can have on collection development. First, we have to be a critical consumer. Second, we have to look through the lens of the patron. We have to think about our young readers. We have to remember that I'm not creating my own personal library or my library collection for my personal children. I will be curating a collection for hundreds of children for years to come, spanning an age band with different curricular needs and even more varied interests. In short, this isn't about what the adults want. We should be giving kids what they want to read. I also learned that we have to be very self-aware and very reflective of our own personal biases. We have to be honest with ourselves, and we have to be willing to check ourselves and our own biases against our policies so that we are not censoring our patrons and restricting access and infringing on their rights to intellectual freedom. Here are my references and resources. Thank you so much.